name is Fred Toomey. I'm president of Bedford Port Society, and we're here to look at the completion of our newly renovated Seamen's Bethel and restored Mariners Home. As you can see, we have a new walkway and new main entrance to the new connector between the Mariners Home and the Seamen's Bethel. Something that was never had before, but now gives us handicapped accessibility to both the chapel and the Mariners Home and the new Whaling Museum exhibit on the first floor. The new connector, which is a post and beam construction, and this was designed to keep a modern facade, but keeping in the historic fabric of the two buildings. This desk was made out of floorboards from the subfloor of the old salt box. These boards were originally 30 feet long, 29 inches wide, and we dug them up, cleaned them all up, and polyed them. And in fact, the architect, Joe Booth, actually designed and made this out of the leftover wood from the project. We are now entering the salt box. This room was so named because of the fact that in the old days when the whalers were on board ship, the salt box was always the first deck below the main deck, and it was used to store provisions. As the provisions dwindled down, the crew was allowed to use it for recreational purposes. What we will be using it for now is for lectures and educational forums, along with the Whaling Museum and the National Park Service. Every day, usually 2 or 3 times a day, there are grade school kids coming through. And we have little lectures in here explaining about the whaling history of New Bedford and the history of the Mariners Home and the Port Society in general. Every Memorial Day, this organ is carried down to the waterfront where we remember all the people that have lost their lives at sea. We toll the bell for each individual, and we read off the names of all those people. The wheelbarrow dates back to 1860. The organ goes back to 1835, and it still plays, believe it or not. And it's carried down usually by family members who have lost members of their family at sea. To my left over here is the picture of all the various ministers who have serviced the chapel over the years, starting with Enoch Mudge and going right up the line up until 1990, which was the last minister to service our church. We still have services here, not regular Sunday services, but memorials, baptisms, weddings, and things of that nature. And we're serviced by 7 area ministers and priests of various denominations. We are a non-denominational chapel. So we do service weddings, baptisms, memorial services, and things of that nature. We do have 6 services a year in recognition of Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, the Fisherman's Memorial on Memorial Day, the 6 deck division, and the 4 chaplains. This is known as our wall of disasters that have occurred over the course of years in the greater New Bedford area and Cape Cod area. We have a chart listing all the disasters that have happened up until the 1990s. And then we have life preservers from various boats that have gone down off the coast of Nantucket and in the Atlantic. One of the most interesting features is this life preserver here. The original boat was the Pocahontas. It was bought by another family and it was renamed the Michelle and Annette. This life preserver was found 22 years later off the coast of France, and the lady somehow heard about New Bedford and the New Bedford Port Society, and she sent us a letter saying that she had found this life preserver. So we contacted her and went back and forth. A little difficult because she only spoke French and none of us over here spoke French, so Parisian French is a little different than Canadian French. So we finally found somebody that could speak fluent Parisian French and translated for us, and we communicated, and finally she sent this back to us. We received this 3 years ago, and we thought it'd be appropriate to hang it here. Moving on through into an area that's basically used for displays. We have a number of artifacts here from the old Mariner's home on display. Over here we have beams, or sections of beams, that were cut out when we opened up the floors and the walls and found the condition of these beams. Listening to the structural engineer, he said to us that basically, if we hadn't done the work that we did now, in 5 to 7 years, we would have had a historical pile of wood. Entering the main foyer of the chapel, again we have plaques designating the history. We have a picture of Herman Melville here and a little plaque dedicated to him. Along with that, we also have a plaque commemorating the Coast Guard Academy, which back in the day was called a Revenue Academy when it was stationed down, well, actually it was the first Coast Guard Academy was over here on State Pier. We have another plaque over here dedicated to the 6th Deck Division, which was one of the first units out of Massachusetts to go overseas and fight the Germans. As we enter the main chapel, one of the interesting things to note is the fact that for the first time in the history since 1850, we now have central heat and air conditioning throughout. Previous to that, if you look at the grates in the floor, there was a heating system in the basement, coal stove at first, and then it was changed to oil in later years. We used natural ventilation back in the day with just opening the windows and allowing the wind to blow through. Some of the brides in the summer did not enjoy it too much. Here we have the organ loft, and in the back of the organ we have a clock that was donated to us by Lieutenant Commander Sturgis. He was the captain of the USS Coast Guard Cutter McLean, which fought in the Civil War. He was also executive officer for the Coast Guard Academy when it was stationed here in New Bedford. He fell in love with the chapel and he donated this clock to us. This bell is the bell we use to toll when we go down to the waterfront. This was crafted by Paul Revere back in the day. It was donated to us in 1850. We don't know the original donor, but it was donated to us, and it's the same brass that's used in the Paul Revere bell in Philadelphia. This project actually started approximately 7 years ago when we noticed that we had an issue with the south wall of the Bethel. Upon opening the wall up, we found that the sill and most of the major beams within the wall had all been eaten away by powder post beetles and water damage. So that project started us approximately 7 years ago. We rebuilt the whole south wall. From there, we moved on to the front facade of the Bethel, which was in desperate need of repair. Again, a lot of the beams were rotted away. Once we finished the front facade of the Bethel, we moved inside. What you see inside here in the actual chapel are the colors as close as we can come to what the original colors of the Bethel were back in the 1850s. These were determined by the National Park Service, and they had a historian come in here and review all the chips and colors. There were 7 different coats of paint on here. And we've narrowed it down and brought it to as close as we can replicate the original colors of the chapel. This pulpit was installed in 1959 because of all the ramblings from the movie Moby Dick, which was filmed in 1956, the original with Gregory Peck. People were coming in looking for a ship's prow, or ship's bow, however you want to pronounce it. So in 1959, the Port Society decided to commission Palmer Scott, who built this ship's prow here, and it's been here ever since. One of the interesting features is the billet head on the front of the thing, which is part of the original sill from the south wall. After it was taken down, we saved a section of the sill, and one of the ship's boatwrights down in the south end here decided to carve this billet head out so that we can put it on here and utilize it. Basically, we have two distinct plaques on the walls. One is called the cenotaph, and the other one is a basic plaque. The difference being the cenotaphs are grave markers without a body. Those are the people that have lost their lives at sea and they've never had the bodies recovered. The regular plaques on the front by the pulpit list all the fishermen who have died at sea but have had their bodies recovered and brought home. Our present mayor lost his grandfather on 3/16/52 when the Annecy Perry went down off the coast of Nantucket with the whole crew. One of the interesting cenotaphs here is this one here, Captain William Swain. Herman Melville, in his day, when he was here, used to sit in this general area. And he got the inspiration for how Captain Ahab died in the book from this cenotaph. In fact, a lot of the writings within Moby Dick, he got his inspiration from the cenotaphs on these walls, and then a lot of the inscriptions. So all these strange writings you see in Moby Dick, it came right off of these walls. We're entering into the new section, right? The walkover between the Bethel and the Mariners' Home. We are now into the walkover area, which is part of the new construction that was made available. This is a post and beam type construction to keep in tune with while being modern, it's keeping in tune with the history of the area and maintaining the historic fabric of the two buildings combined. Part of the requirements from the Department of the Interior is that this building couldn't look like or attached to either one of the existing buildings, so that if it's ever torn down, the existing buildings could remain intact without having to do some major renovations or repairs to them. And that was a requirement from the Department of Interior. This elevator is put in for handicapped access. Between the times that we drew up plans originally and we took out the building permit, the code changed. So all this had to be revamped and upgraded to accommodate a gurney. So we had to expand the dimensions of the elevator by 1 foot on either side, which changed the dimensions of our connector. So it was a long, drawn-out process that we thought was going to take a couple of months and ended up taking almost a year just in the planning. This is where the mariners used to sleep. Back in the 1850s, they could get a room here, or a bed, I should say, for 25 cents, and that would give them a bed and a cup of coffee in the morning, provided they made their bed. Otherwise, they were charged an extra nickel if they didn't make their bed. In the 1990s, when we were still running this as a home for mariners, we were charging $10 a night, but that included a shower too. This is the break room for all the people that work here. It's very simple, little sink, they can come up here. the docents when they're working, or the people from Whale on the second floor, or the Preservation Society, or some of our workers can come in here, take a break, get away from the crowds, have their lunch or whatever. We are now entering into our new conference room. Back in the 1850s, when the Roach family gave this to, or when the Roach family had it, this room actually was the servants' quarters and the maids. The chief maid this was part of her room, because across the hall, where our offices are now, are where the children slept. It is now utilized as a conference room for people that work here. Whaling Museum, National Park Service utilizes it for having small conferences, and we also have educational lectures up here. Going right along, we're now going to go down to the second floor, which is now the offices of Whale, Waterfront Historic Area League, and the New Bedford Preservation Society, who are now our tenants. As we go across the hall, we will go into the offices of the New Bedford Preservation Society, who haven't moved in officially yet. This office was originally the chaplain's bedroom, the ones that all used to live here. And it was commonly known as the Blue Room because everything in here was painted blue, from floors, walls, ceilings, even had blue light bulbs. And the windows were even painted blue. He loved the color blue. Again, going through all the historical paint and characters, we have restored this as much as possible to the original colors that were known back in the days in the 1850s when we were still here. Both buildings are now equipped with the internet, Wi-Fi, modern camera systems, the security system. We have 22 cameras throughout the complex. We have an alarm system, and as I said, we have Wi-Fi, we have the internet, and we have modern sprinkler systems, a new fire alarm system, and all the utilities have been upgraded. Okay, we are now on the first floor, which used to be the office spaces of the New Bedford Port Society, but it's now being utilized by the New Bedford Whaling Museum to have exhibits. Basically, there are 4 exhibits as you enter from the new connector. The first of which is being Moby Dick and the Silver Screen. In here we depict various issues relative to whaling and the movie Moby Dick, also the movie Down at Sea and Ships. A lot of artifacts and memorabilia are in here. Okay, as we move on through, we go into the Roach Room, which is dedicated to the family that donated this property to us, the William Roach family. In here are artifacts from the era when they were back in the heyday of whaling. The Roach family was probably one of the richest families in New Bedford or Nantucket at the time. So what you see in here are artifacts from their properties when they were back here in the early 1800s. We're now moving into what used to be our main office. This room is dedicated to the Mariners' Home and the Bedford Port Society in general. In here it's called Safe Harbor, Safe Haven Room, and it depicts basically the lighthouse, Butler's Flat Lighthouse out there. We have the original desk here. That was the lighthouse keepers. As we move along, we go into the final exhibit, which is dedicated to the fishing industry of today. The only thing that's out of place in here really, but we thought it was very appropriate, is we opened up the north wall and we found this old cooking fireplace with the oven intact when we opened up this wall. This basically represents 7 years of study and work to try and bring both the Mariners Home and the Seamen's Bethel up to modern standards while maintaining the historic fabric of the neighborhood and making both the Bethel and the Mariners Home a part of the main tourist attraction for the area.
New Bedford Cable Network. Public, educational, and government access. Channel 95 is public access. Channel 9 is educational access. Channel 18 is government access. New Bedford Cable Network. We're more than you know us for.
There are oceans and rocks, places where fish swim and birds fly, where mountains spring up and trees and grass grow all around. History is made, art is created, things happen that should always be remembered. Heroes emerge. A woman sets people free. A man makes light. A leader steps forward. People get together. They help each other out. They make their own places to run and play and contemplate the universe. There's pride and gratitude and fun. It belongs to everyone. It can be a place, a feeling, a state of mind. So get up, get out there, and find your park.